Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, and today is Monday, August 3rd. This is episode number 225 of the Baseball Podcast. We're coming at you hot and heavy every day here. Baseball is back. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss here today. We're going to get into everything that has happened on the field in the next three segments of today's episode. We're going to get into everything that happened this weekend, where we stand, what's going on, because we are now about 10, 11 days into the season. And if you're doing the conversion rate to what that is over 162 games, we're looking at about 28 games or so. We are officially a month into the season. So the month of April is in the books. Where are we? Who continues to surprise? Updates on the standings with the expanded playoffs. We'll get into who's in contention and what their record is. Will we have somebody under 500 make the playoffs? I don't know. Stick around. We're going to discuss all of that in the coming segments. But for now, we have to start with some off-the-field discussion in Major League Baseball, specifically speaking about Yoenis Cespedes. He had himself an eventful weekend. He decided to not show up for work on Saturday, not show up to the ballpark, and the Mets released a statement saying they didn't know where he was. They haven't been able to get into contact with him. They alerted the hotel and the hotel management once it became obvious that he was not going to show up at the ballpark that day. And the hotel went, checked his room, and Yoenis and all of Yoenis' stuff had disappeared from the hotel room. So he basically packed up all his stuff, got out of town, decided, hey, I'm not doing this anymore, didn't tell anybody, which is certainly not a good look if you're a professional baseball player, let alone if you're a professional anything. I mean, if you no-show for work, it's just no-show, no communication. Yeah, you're looking at a pink slip out the door here. So Yoenis Cespedes doesn't show up, doesn't let anybody know. Eventually, the New York Mets are able to get in touch with him, so we are able to find out that he is fine. He, however, is opting out of the rest of the 2020 season. And is this the last we're ever going to see Yoenis Cespedes in a Major League uniform? I think there's a high probability that it is. I mean, looking at his statistics from this year, he had played in 8 games, had 31 at-bats, only 5 hits, hitting 161. He did have 2 home runs and 4 RBIs. But basically what I think it came down to, honestly, was him looking in the mirror, realizing that he had 31 at-bats and 15 strikeouts. I mean, half the time, the guy couldn't even put the ball in play. He had only walked twice and hitting 161 on base of 235. And I think he honestly had the realization that he just couldn't hack it anymore. He was getting paid this absurd amount of money, once again, by the New York Mets. The pressure of the contract. He's had the injuries the last 2 years, which, again, if the sources and everything is correct, which everybody assumes it is at this point, he was either running to or from a bore back in his home country, sprained/broke his foot, ankle, multiple surgeries, multiple years missed. He was coming back healthy. But basically, it looks like he feels he just can't hack it anymore. And I think back to the Indianapolis Colts, it was the Buffalo Bill, who basically retired at halftime this past season or 2 years ago, got up and left. And I think this is what Yoenis is essentially doing. Again, I think he's looking in the mirror, realizing he's getting paid a ton of money, and he is certainly not performing up to those expectations. But Again, let's dive into Yoenis Cespedes' career, his background, because if this is the last we see of him, he is one of those players that has certainly put together a career that was much better than I myself realized on the surface level. And looking back to how he got here, he came over from Cuba, so he made the big bucks right away, didn't have to go through arbitration, league minimum, any of that type of communication. He signed a 4-year, $36 million deal with the Oakland Athletics. He only ended up playing 2.5 years of that deal in Oakland before he got shipped out to Boston, where he finished out the rest of 2014. During his time in Oakland, though, he did perform pretty well. Over the course of, 365 games, he hit .262. He had 66 home runs, 229 RBIs, OBP of .318. So showed out offensively, which led to him getting traded to Boston for the stretch run there in 2014. And then he got traded again in the offseason. Boston shipped him out to the Detroit Tigers, who had him for half a season before ultimately they traded him to the New York Mets, where he was there and has been there for the last 5 seasons, including a 4-year, $110 million deal that we are talking about that he is not living up to currently. So during his time in Oakland, again hitting .262, he then got traded to Boston for a total of 51 games where he hit .269 with 5 home runs and 33 RBIs, a decent amount of RBIs there for only 51 games. In the offseason, gets traded to Detroit. He hit .293 for Detroit. Didn't have a lot of power that year, only 2 home runs, which once again got him shipped off to the New York Mets, where he's been for a total of 316 games. And this gets back to the fact that when he is healthy, pre all these injuries, he's been a pretty good ball player, because for the Mets, he hit .279 with 76 home runs and 205 RBIs. The guy for his career is a .273 hitter, 165 home runs, 500 RBIs, and 834 games played. He's finished as good as 8th in the MVP voting, 13th and 10th. A couple of other years, he's a 2-time All-Star, a Silver Slugger Award winner for the New York Mets in 2016 when he had 31 homers, 86 RBIs, and hit .280 for them. That's why they gave him the 4 years, $110 million. But everything went downhill after that 2016 season. In 2017, hampered by injuries, only played 81 games. He did hit .292 with 17 home runs again. So very productive when he is in the lineup. Then you have 2018, where he was only limited to 38 games and dipped all the way down to hitting .262. Missed the rest of 2018 with that injury. Missed the entirety of 2019. Here he comes back 2020, hitting .161 with 15 strikeouts and only 31 at-bats. So, like I said, things were not looking good for Yoenis Cespedes here early on. I think he honestly looked in the mirror and decided that with all of the situation going on, with the high level of payment that he should be receiving, if he opts out, he is no longer guaranteed this salary from the Mets. So basically he's saying, okay, I've made my money. I've made enough to enjoy myself here. I don't have the exact number he's made over his career, but it's upwards of $180 million or $160 million. So he's definitely made enough to be able to ride off into the sunset here, so to speak, and not have to worry about money or financial problems for the rest of his life or even his kid's life or future kid's life. But, looking at the coronavirus, looking at recent outbreaks here within the Miami Marlins organization, the Phillies did limit it to 1 or 2 individuals here. We continue to be about a week out since we discussed on Thursday's episode where the Phillies stood and how the Phillies basically saved the Major League Baseball season. Well, now we have another outbreak that is happening across Major League Baseball, and that is with the St. Louis Cardinals. So basically, Yoenis says, hey, we're having multiple outbreaks. I'm going to sit out since this has started to happen here. He's not the only one that's done so recently. There's been a couple of other individuals who, since the recent outbreaks, have been like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down here because a lot of other players throughout the league clearly are not doing their part and are continuing to go out, leave the hotel, break protocol, and we're seeing the issues come to light here week after week. Week 1, it was the Miami Marlins. Now it's the St. Louis Cardinals. A brief update on the Marlins. It has been reported that the infected individuals, so the people who have tested positive in the recent days this weekend, have got on sleeper buses and are currently in process of being en route back to Miami. So the negative, healthy players are still currently in the hotel in Philadelphia. A week later, the positive individuals have left and returned to Miami, so this is outside of protocol. Once again, the positive individuals, because MLB had expected it to be 1, 2, 3 guys, were supposed to stay back at the hotel until multiple negative tests. Well, when that number swelled to 20 and became the majority out of the people who had traveled, they said, okay, well, the Marlins are staying on the road, obviously not playing back in Miami. Let's send the positive individuals back to Miami, keep the negative ones here because their next game is supposed to be in Baltimore, and Baltimore is only about an hour and a half to 2 hours south of Philadelphia, so they can hop on a bus, head down there, and try to regroup moving forward. But I can only imagine for these guys, right? They expected to be in Philadelphia for a weekend, coming off a trip to Atlanta. And then they're heading home to Miami. So they have 4 or 5 days worth of clothes. Well, now they've been on the road for upwards of 14 or 15 days. So they've cycled through everything they have in that suitcase 2, 3, 4 times, haven't been able to leave their rooms, continue to stay quarantined. Thank goodness other sports have come back for their sake. I'm sure they've been clicking into the NBA, the NHL, all the other sports trying to get back in action here. It's just fascinating to kind of see the evolution of, the rules or the regulations, the standards, what everybody has to abide by as they continue to try to progress through the summer. But the most recent outbreak has taken place in St. Louis. Friday into Saturday, 1 player and 3 staff members tested positive, as well as there were 4 inconclusive results. And within those 4, it was 1 player and 3 staff members. So overall, 2 players and 6 staff members are quote unquote assumed positive until proven otherwise. Saturday into Sunday night here as of time of recording, there are reports that multiple additional people, I should say, they haven't said whether or not they're players and who they are, but individuals for the Cardinals have tested positive. They got tested once again Sunday with expedited results, hopefully Sunday evening. They're not even waiting for the Sunday into Monday testing to take place, and the reports once again that they are going to come back, quote unquote, with not good results. So people in the building expect that there's going to be some sort of Miami Marlins style of outbreak. Again, we don't know what happened, who got it, where they got it. Did they go out in St. Louis? Were they traveling? And I believe they are currently in Milwaukee. Once they arrived to Milwaukee on Saturday, got the initial positive/inconclusive results. They then quarantined in the hotel in Milwaukee for the rest of the weekend. Their games were canceled. The Phillies games have been canceled for a week. The Marlins have been canceled. The Yankees have had a few canceled. It's just fascinating to kind of see the evolution and a lot of the pushback that this isn't baseball. The integrity of the sport has been compromised. You guys have heard it here on the podcast, I'm sure, but we are now playing 7-inning doubleheaders. Not even the Patriot League Division I, from my own experience, 7-9, 7-9 doubleheaders. They're going straight to 7s, and people are upset about that because the bullpen may not be used anymore. The middle relievers basically become null and void in that situation. Your starter goes 5 or 6, then you're going right to the closer, and it's a different brand of baseball in 7 innings. It really is. Once you get through to that 4th, 5th inning, you're really just playing 1 run at a time, thinking it's 7, 8, 9 here, trying to push across anything you can. But even with the multiple outbreaks, once again, the Phillies seem to have contained it and not caught it from the Marlins, which has been super positive for Major League Baseball. Rob Manfred has come out and spoken about the recent outbreaks, and basically, I'm going to paraphrase Commissioner Manfred here, but he basically said the players need to be better. The players need to hold each other more accountable, putting the onus on them. Basically, we've heard the reports, hey, the Marlins went out. We don't know. Nothing's set in stone, but you guys need to improve. He called himself, he said, I am not a quitter. There is no reason to quit now. They are continuing to trudge forward. He did mention that it is a fluid situation and things could change daily, things could change weekly, as we've seen from a doubleheader rule being implemented on the fly, agreed upon July 31st, implemented August 1st moving forward. All teams may not play the same amount of games. We're living in a world where if the Marlins miss 2 weeks, yes, they're going to try to make up as many games as possible, but they may not get all the way back to that 60 mark. So Commissioner Manfred discussed possibly going based on winning percentage at the end of the year. That's going to be a buzzword or a couple of words moving forward, winning percentage. If the Marlins only get to 55, 58, if the Phillies only get to 55, what's that minimum number? I guess that's my only follow-up question is, I understand they may not get to 60, but do we have to get to 50? Is it 45? Is it 55? I mean, if we have another outbreak again in Miami and they miss an additional 2 weeks in August and they only get to 48 games, does that qualify? Is that enough to get to the quote-unquote winning percentage breakdown? That's an answer that hasn't been talked about yet, and hopefully we'll get something on moving forward. But it truly is just a fluid season with rules coming at you left and right. Just strap in, guys. Just get ready for the ride. It's going to be nothing like baseball we've seen in the history of baseball. 7-inning doubleheaders at the major league level. It's crazy to think about certain things happening. Runners on second base, DH in the National League. Just enjoy it for the 60 games or even the 45 or 50 that it looks like the Marlins are ultimately going to play this summer. But that'll wrap it up here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to break down this weekend's action. We're going to go kind of divisions by divisions, East, Central, West. We're going to start out with the East, look at the American League, the National League, where we're at. So stick around, everybody. I am Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, and this is episode number 225 of the Baseball Podcast here on Monday, August 3rd. If you haven't done so yet, head to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this. Give us a 5-star rating, write a review. Haven't had a review in a couple of weeks here. Love to get a new one on to read for you guys out there. So if you're listening to this and you're enjoying today's episode, scroll on down wherever you are and write us a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way to help us spread the word of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. And if you haven't done so already, head to social media as well. We got a Facebook page, a Twitter, Instagram, everything on there, the GSMC Baseball Podcast. It's where you can find and stay up to date with all of the latest information, everything that's going on out there. It really helps us grow, so if you could do that, I certainly appreciate it. And we at the GSMC Podcast Network very much appreciate you guys listening. But diving into the second segment here, going around the league like we talked about, wrapping up this weekend's baseball, talking about where we currently stand. Let's start out with the Eastern divisions. I figured I'd break it down East, Central, West, since those teams are playing against each other, and specifically starting out here in the American League East, where the New York Yankees are at the top of the division. They currently sit at 6-1, and as of time of recording here, are in the process of playing the Boston Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball. So they could head to 7-1. They are certainly favored to do so here tonight, and they look every bit of the dominant force that we had anticipated coming into this year. I mean, this offense continues to just rock and roll. You got pretty much everybody hitting for them. At the top here, let's just roll on down the lineup. Aaron Judge, he's hitting .259 with 4 home runs. He had homered in 4 straight games. Heading into Sunday night's action here, he has 9 RBIs on the early season. The only concern for Mr. Judge is the 11 strikeouts in 27 at-bats so far. So when he hits it, he's hitting it hard, and it's going a long way, but he is swinging and missing more than he has in years past. So look for that and look for him to try to cut down on that moving forward. But the star of the show so far, DJ LeMahieu at second base. He's just a hitting machine. He's hitting .385 in 26 at-bats with a home run and 3 RBIs. Let's see here. 3 strikeouts, no walks, so just putting the ball in play. But he's been fun to watch at the second base position for the Yankees early on. Gleyber Torres, he's only hitting .217. He's been a disappointment so far in 23 at-bats. Giancarlo Stanton, he looks back and better than ever, hitting .348, 2 home runs. Both of those were early on against the Nationals, so we haven't seen one lately here in about a week from Giancarlo, but hitting for average, taking his walks. He has 4 walks early on. And let's see, Gio at third base for him there. He's hitting .227. He had the big grand slam. 2 home runs this year, 5 RBIs, 5 walks, leads the team for him. Luke Voigt at first base hitting .238. He struggled. And then Gary Sanchez. Everybody but Gary Sanchez and I guess Brett Gardner I could put into this as well out there in left field. Gardner hitting .063. But Sanchez hitting .056 with no home runs, no RBIs, 10 strikeouts, and 18 at-bats. Not a good look for Gary Sanchez early on. Aaron Boone has said he thinks he's putting a little bit too much pressure on himself. The big city trying to do everything here in the sprint of 60 games, maybe getting a bit out of his comfort zone. But, man, that's not what you're looking for from a stud like Sanchez behind the dish. And I don't know what exactly he can do to get out of it, but he's clearly not seeing the ball well at all, striking out over half the time, hitting .056 here early on in the 2020 season. From the pitching side of things for the Yankees, Garrett Cole has been good for them. Yes, he does have a .309 ERA, but he has been very good in 11 innings early on. The rest of the rotation, Montgomery, he was impressive in 5 2/3, only a 1.59 ERA. And then you get into the bullpen. It's still a little bit early to judge the pitching staff. You can really kind of go on 1 or 2 starts. The bullpen may have had an issue here or there, like the likes of Michael King for them, who had a tough start, so he's got a 10 ERA, or James Paxton, who gave up 3 runs in 1 inning with a 27 ERA. So still early on to kind of judge the pitching side of things, but we're getting to 30 at-bats here offensively, so we'll spend a bit more time on that side. But continuing down the AL East, the surprise second-place team, one of the early surprises continuing here now that we're about a week and a half in. I talked to you guys about it a week ago, but the Baltimore Orioles, they're 5-3. Let's see, they just swept Tampa Bay. I mean, what? They sweep the Rays, some people's darling picks for the World Series or to win the American League East. They swept them for the first time since 2018. They've been super impressive offensively. I mean, Hanser Alberto at second base hitting .429 here in 35 at-bats, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. Nunez hitting .281. Couple of home runs in 32 at-bats. It's just, man, I mean, Ruiz, there it is, .318. 3 home runs, 7 RBIs early on, leads the team with 3 home runs, but it's really been just a lot of individuals. I mean, Severino behind the dish is hitting .250. You got Hayes out in right field, really the only one struggling for them, hitting .100 here in 30 at-bats, so 3 for 30 early on offensively. And honestly, I don't know how the Orioles are doing it. I certainly didn't have them winning maybe 1 game against Tampa Bay this weekend, but to sweep them and to do so in impressive fashion. 1 game did go to 11 innings, so they took advantage of that extra inning rule, but a 5-1 victory here on Sunday. An impressive outing from Phillips and the rest of that offense to get to 5-3, currently in second place, and they find themselves firmly in a playoff spot here through 10 days. In third place, you currently have the Toronto Blue Jays, who sit at 3-4. They've been affected by the coronavirus outbreak. They were supposed to be in Philadelphia playing the Phillies at one point, and they haven't found themselves on the diamond since Thursday. So they will get back at it here. It looks like Tuesday at Atlanta, 3-4 early on, third place. That's pretty good for Toronto. Offensively, some of the names have hit, some of them have not early on. Vlad Guerrero Jr. hitting $172 in 29 at-bats. Not a good start to 2020 for him. People have learned the scouting report for Guerrero Jr. The pitching has obviously made the adjustment. Can Guerrero now make that counter adjustment, that second adjustment to prove he belongs here at the major league level? We've seen the likes of Rhys Hoskins really struggle to kind of make that second adjustment to big league pitching, but it's early, but 29 at-bats in, hitting 172. Certainly a surprise for Vlad Jr. Kayvon Biggio hitting 200, not much better for him in 30 at-bats, but they've been carried by the likes of Gurriel Jr., hitting 318, and Hernandez out in left field, 321, 4 home runs, 6 RBIs. Truly a force, man. On 28 at-bats, it's been impressive for him. Bo Bichette hitting 286. He's been solid. Hasn't gone deep yet, but impressive. And from the pitching side of things, we saw them call up the big prospect and make his major league debut, Mr. Nate Pearson. So it was fun to watch him throw. Let's see, in 5 innings, he did not give up a run in his outing. Ryu, in 9 total innings, he's been hit around. He's given up 8 runs in 9 innings for an 8 ERA, but Schoenmacher was fantastic in 6 innings. Hatch didn't give up a run in 5 innings. Pearson, Roark only gave up 1 run in 5 innings. So the starting staff for Toronto, certainly a bit of a surprise here early on through the get-go. In 4th place was the team we just mentioned in Baltimore. That's the Tampa Bay Rays at 4-6. They are certainly a disappointment from a team perspective early on, and you have to point to the offense. Total hitting 213 as a team. Hunter Renfroe's hitting 182 in 33 at-bats. Yandy Diaz hitting 167. Let's see, Kiermaier hitting 200. Margot hitting 100. All of these guys in over 25 at-bats. Choi hitting 167 in 24 at-bats. Just nothing to really talk about offensively outside of Willie Adams at shortstop hitting 333 and Brandon Lowe at second base. So up the middle, they've performed offensively, but everybody else certainly way below expectations down there in Tampa Bay. And from a pitching perspective, it's been a bit up and down. Yarborough has been excellent, 1.54 ERA in 11 innings. Charlie Morton, not so much, 8 earned runs in 9 innings for an 8 ERA. Glasnow has been solid, 3 ERA in 8 innings. Chirinos has been good, a 1.0 ERA. So up and down from the pitching staff, but the offense has certainly let the Tampa Bay Rays down thus far. And then here in the basement, unfortunately, a team that I think is in for a long summer is the Boston Red Sox. And they lost the first 2 games against the New York Yankees. Again, as of time of recording here, currently facing off in Sunday Night Baseball. But offensively for them, it's been a bit of a struggle at the top. Devers hitting 182. J.D. Martinez only hitting 219. Bogarts 241. Alex Verdugo hitting 233. Benintendi hitting 083. There are a few bright spots like Kevin Pillar in center field hitting 423 here in the early on. But overall, Boston offensively certainly lacking the production from the big names such as J.D. Martinez. The pitching, not great. Nathan Eovaldi, yes, he's been good. Only 3 earned runs in 11 innings, but Martin Perez, an ERA over 5, Godley over 5, Weber over 10, Bryce over 5. So nothing going on the pitching mound for the Boston Red Sox here. So the Yankees at the top, followed by the surprise Baltimore Orioles on the American League side. And then on the National League side, the Atlanta Braves at the top, just like everybody predicted. They have won 5 in a row, 3 straight against the New York Mets with a 4th game coming here on Monday. They're at 7-3 at the top of the division. Offensively, they've been led by Dansby Swanson, hitting 368 in 38 at-bats. You got Marcelo Zuna hitting 324 in 34 at-bats. Everybody else doing okay thus far. Acuna Jr. hitting under 200. Albies hitting under 200. Freddie Freeman hitting .242. Matt Adams, .222. So certainly not doing it with a ton of offense, just taking advantage of the situation that's currently happening in New York that we've discussed, as well as facing off against the Boston Red Sox that we've seen really aren't the team offensively that they've been in years past. And this pitching staff with Fried at a 2.3 ERA, Soroka 1.59 have certainly taken advantage of it thus far. And we'll look to finish off the 4-game sweep in New York on Monday evening. In second place, we have the Miami Marlins based on winning percentage. They're still 2-1. They haven't played since last Sunday, but good news as of today, they had a no positive tests for the second day in a row. The schedule for them is all out of whack, but apparently they're going to be facing off against the Baltimore Orioles here in the next couple of days. That'll be a wait and see. The schedule is really crazy here in the National League East. I mean, you have the Nationals at 3-4. They've played 7 games. Atlanta 10, the Marlins 3, the Phillies 3, the Mets 10. So all over the place. But the Nationals sit at 3-4 in third place here in the NL East. Adam Eaton leading the way, 296 offensively. Starlin Castro hitting 360. Robles 304. But then you're looking here, Juan Soto has yet to make an appearance based on his positive test. So that's certainly been a deterrent for them here to get to under 500 through the first 10 days. Next up, you got the Phillies in fourth place at 1-2. Just like the Marlins haven't played since last Sunday. Their schedule has changed. Apparently now they have 4 games coming up against the New York Yankees. 2 at home, 2 on the road. They're going to go back and forth. Jake Arrieta will be making his first start in 357 days. So he came off surgery last year, then was getting ready, then it was shut down. He didn't play in the first 3 games. So literally a week short of a calendar year in between starts for Jake Arrieta. It'll be fascinating to see if he has anything in the tank, if that two-seamer's coming back running. He's working in that cutter now. But your first start coming back against the New York Yankees and that offense and the way they've been performing, I really don't have high expectations here locally for Jake Arrieta's first outing. I'm really not diving into the stats with the likes of the Marlins or the Phillies because they've played 3 games. Guys only have 10 at-bats. We know Didi Gregorius got off to a hot start. Hoskins is struggling. But again, I think the sample size is just a bit too small there to really dive into. But the 5th place team here playing 10 games with a record of 3-7. That is the New York Mets. They do have something we could dive into here. And obviously we talked about the situation with Yoenis Cespedes and what has taken place over the weekend, where we currently stand. But diving into some more statistics, I mean, the start of Pete Alonso has been a big reason why they're struggling. He's only hitting 175 with 1 home run through 40 at-bats early on. So think about through a month of the season, he would only have 1 home run. He could be pressing here early on, trying to chase that 50-plus pace he was on last year for Rookie of the Year. Jeff McNeil, he is performing. He's hitting 343. Michael Conforto, 286. Brandon Nimmo, 265. They're led by Robinson Cano, currently hitting 375. We touched on it. Cespedes, 161, a ton of strikeouts. Wilson Ramos behind the dish, only hitting 179. He's been known as a bit of an offensive catcher, so that is very disappointing early on for Ramos behind the dish. They're counting on much more from him moving forward. On the pitching side of things, Jacob deGrom has been fantastic in his 2 outings, 11 innings, only 2 earned runs, a 1.64 ERA. David Peterson, 3.86 ERA. Steven Matz, 3.18. So pitching hasn't been the root of all evil. I mean, yes, Rick Porcello did get lit up last week. His ERA is still 13.5 after 6 innings here. Michael Wacha, a 6 ERA early on, but I really don't see the Mets being able to turn this around with everything with Cespedes, the problems with Alonso, everything that's going on in New York. I think they're in for a tough couple of weeks here until they're able to stabilize things. But looking at the division once again, the Braves 7-3, Marlins 2-1, Nationals 3-4, Phillies 1-2, Mets 3-7. It is currently just chaos in the National League East. But that'll wrap things up here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we'll dive into the Central Division, starting out in the American League, then the National League. So stick around, everybody. I am Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, everybody, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 225 of the Baseball Podcast. We're continuing around Major League Baseball results from the weekend. Last segment, we talked about the American League and National League East. In segment number 3 here, we will be discussing the American League and National League Central. Instead of going American League, National League, I broke it up East, Central, West, since that's the way the schedule is playing out this year. So there's a lot of overlap based on competition, based on the divisions, their records, and why they are the way they are. So continuing around, jumping right into the American League Central and the Minnesota Twins, who find themselves at the top of the division through 9 games of their current schedule. They have won 6 of 7 games, including 3 of 4 against the Cleveland Indians this weekend, in what turned out to be an excellent series. If you're a fan of pitching between the Twins and Indians, it was just impressive to watch. Looking up the box scores, watching the highlights, a lot of impressive action coming from the mound this weekend. But the Twins take 3 of 4 offensively. They continue to be led by Nelson Cruz. He continues to just put up numbers at the age of 40. He's hitting .324 with 3 home runs and 12 RBIs, all tops for the squad here in Minnesota. Let's see, Jorge Polanco hitting .270 in 37 at-bats. Max Kepler only hitting .212. Rosario only .219. Miguel Sano only .130. He continues to disappoint as what was one time a big-time prospect, Mr. Sano, but he just hasn't figured it out at the big league level. Josh Donaldson early on only hitting .182. Their big free agent signing has struggled to find his footing there in Minnesota. He only has 1 home run and 2 RBIs through 22 at-bats in 7 games. So certainly a struggle and not what they're looking for. Byron Buxton, he is on the disabled list or the injured list, hitting .083 after 5 games and 12 plate appearances. He just can't get things going offensively. Plays a fantastic center field, but just can't seem to hit here. So the pitching staff, though, in Minnesota, like we talked about, they have just been excellent. I mean, looking at the top down, Maeda, 1.64 ERA in 11 innings. Dobnak, 1.0 ERA in 9 innings. Barrios, he's the only one that's been hit around, and he's the ace of the staff. He's got a 7 ERA, 7 earned runs in 9 innings. But Tyler Clippard out of the bullpen, 1.50 ERA. Rich Hill was good in his lone start. Didn't give up a run in 5 innings. I mean, Tyler Duffy, yet to allow a run in 4 innings. Trevor May, 1 run in 4 innings. Let's see, Taylor Rogers hasn't given up a run in 3 innings yet. So impressive stuff, certainly early on from the pitching staff in Minnesota. And with 4 coming up against the Pirates, who have been less than stellar out of the gate here, it certainly looks like they're lined up to get to at least 10-3 through the middle of next week. In second place, we have the Chicago White Sox. They have certainly bounced back. They were at 1-4, but have won 4 straight. They recently swept the Kansas City Royals, which puts the Royals in the basement of this division. We'll get to them later, but a huge series for the White Sox to battle back and get some momentum going here. Luis Robert has been fantastic in center field, big-time prospect. He has been as advertised. 351, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, and 37 at-bats. Moncada at third base hitting 313. Tim Anderson hitting 333. Garcia in center field hitting 321. It's just been an onslaught offensively for the White Sox. I mean, you even have Jose Abreu hitting 282, a high average for him. Yasmani Grandal hitting 269. Jimenez out in left field hitting 320. Let's see, Adam Engel hitting 318. It just continues down the list here. I mean, even Madrigal, he's only been in 3 games, but he was hitting 308. It's been impressive stuff from this White Sox offense. And Chicago's hitting as opposed to Minnesota's pitching is why they find themselves here. I mean, Chicago on the bump, a lot of higher numbers. So it really has been the offense carrying them. Dallas Keuchel, 3.3 ERA. Giolito, 6.52. Cease, 6.48. Gonzalez, 7.36. So all of these guys with ERAs right around 5, and yet they find themselves here at 5-4 through the first 10 games. I think they're going to be happy with that when they sit back and look at where they currently stand statistically. The Cleveland Indians find themselves all the way back in 3rd place after losing 3 of 4 to Minnesota, and they've lost 4 of 5 overall. They have 4 games coming up here with the Cincinnati Reds, who have played better baseball of late. So continued competition for Cleveland, and it hasn't been the pitching staff. Let's put it that way in Cleveland. I mean, offensively, Lindor is only hitting 225. Carlos Santana hitting a $188 at first base. Reyes out in right field hitting 194. Domingo Santana hitting 158. Sandy Leon hitting 154. The only 2 guys hitting for him are Cesar Hernandez, who only hits for average at 303, and then Jose Ramirez at third base. Yes, he's hitting 333 with a couple of homers and 5 RBI, so you can't put it on Ramirez early on, but I know they're counting on more from Lindor, Carlos Santana, Reyes, all these guys. They just haven't performed up to the standards there in Cleveland, and you got to keep them away from the pitching staff because I know they're certainly frustrated with what's going on, specifically my man Shane Bieber, who is putting himself firmly in the conversation of best pitcher on the planet right now. I mean, yes, Garrett Cole, Jacob deGrom, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, all of those guys are synonymous with excellent pitching in Major League Baseball. But for those of you guys who don't know Shane Bieber is, and I am assuming it's not a lot of you out there if you're listening to this podcast, but if you have a friend who hasn't dialed into Shane Bieber yet, send him a text and let him know next time he's on the hill and watch that start, because no earned runs in 14 innings, 27 strikeouts, only 1 walk. So 2 strikeouts per inning and only 1 walk. That's 17.4 strikeouts per 9. That's a ridiculous conversation that we could continue to have if that continues over the likes of 60 games. I mean, geez, it's been fun to watch. But Carrasco, 3.75. Savali, 3.75. Yes, Clevinger's up at 4.91. He's given up 6 runs in 11 innings, but Plesac hasn't allowed a run over 8 innings. So it's the offense in Cleveland that has certainly been the disappointment thus far. And the pitching staff is keep them away, because I think there may be some tension brewing in that locker room if this continues over the next week or two. In 4th place here, we have the Detroit Tigers. In the first episode I did, or last episode, they were the darlings of Major League Baseball at 2-1 through the first weekend, but they recently lost 2 of 3 to the Cincinnati Reds, including both games of the 7-inning doubleheader. They were the first team to play the 2 7-inning doubleheader. They lost both games on Sunday, 4-3 and 4-0. So not a good Sunday for them. Next up, they got 4 with the St. Louis Cardinals, who are very tough. So Detroit find themselves continuing to battle here. But, I mean, offensively, diving into some statistics, they're led by Jacoby Jones. He's hitting 379 with 3 home runs. Miguel Cabrera is only hitting for power. He's got 3 home runs, but only hitting 143 through 35 at-bats, so he struggled early on here. Jonathan Schoop hitting 250 with 3 home runs. It's just, man, it's tough for these guys. With Austin Romine hitting 273, Miguel Cabrera Cabrera just falling off. It's tough to read that to you guys because I'm a big Miggy fan, Triple Crown, but to see a guy like that hitting 143, it's just really tough to dive into and see that. But rounding out the American League Central here, we got the Kansas City Royals at 3-7. They were just swept by the Chicago White Sox like we talked about. Next up, they got 4 with the Chicago Cubs, who are playing good baseball. So Kansas City will certainly continue to find themselves in the basement here. But shout out to Whit Merrifield. Early on, having himself a year, hitting .317 with 3 home runs and 9 RBIs, leading the way. You got Jorge Soler as well, hitting .278, couple of home runs. Salvador Perez back to his old self, hitting right around .250 with a couple of dingers. But Kansas City has a long, long summer ahead of them here. But that wraps up the American League Central. Again, the Twins at the top, followed by the White Sox, Indians, and Tigers. It looks like the Twins, White Sox, and Indians are the 3 teams that will be here to stay for the rest of the summer and find themselves in playoff conversation. But let's transition now over to the National League Central, starting out with the Chicago Cubs, who at 7-2 are at the top of the division. They have won 6 of 7, including a sweep of the Pittsburgh Pirates this past weekend. It's been impressive to watch the Cubs here early on. They've outperformed my expectations, led by the likes of Wilson Contreras, hitting .333 here early on. Let's see here. Baez, .243, 3 home runs. Schwarber, .250, 2 home runs. Ian Happ, .286, 3 home runs. Anthony Rizzo, only hitting .214, but does have 3 home runs. Chris Bryant is the lone outlier, hitting .120 with no home runs yet here in 2020. He has struggled from the get-go, but everybody else is doing their part for the Cubbies offense, and that's why it's been 2 home runs, 3 home runs, 3 home runs. It really is just steady coming at you here. And then the pitching staff, Kyle Hendricks, he came back to earth after his first start. His ERA 4.05, but Tyler Chatwood has been fantastic through 2 starts, 0.7 ERA in almost 13 innings. John Lester has been good thus far in 2 starts. He has an ERA 0.82 in 11 innings. Yu Darvish, 2.7 ERA in 2 starts. So the starting pitching is certainly carrying the Cubs, but the offense has been very good across the board outside of, again, Chris Bryant. So the Cubbies, the depth of Chicago, really coming through here for the first week. And then with a 4-piece coming up against the Royals, who we just talked about, are 3-7. They should find themselves here again, almost 10-3, just like the Twins, and feel good during the first 2 weeks of the year. In second place, we have the Milwaukee Brewers at 3-3. They've been off since this past Wednesday due to what happened with the St. Louis Cardinals. They're supposed to play 4 games with the White Sox coming up here. That's to be determined, I believe. They are trying to play those games, but don't hold me to that because things are ever so fluid, as we're learning here in 2020. But Milwaukee through 6 games. Christian Yelich only hitting .037. He's got 1 hit and 27 at-bats. It was a home run, a 3-run home run, but 12 strikeouts, 1 walk, .037. Man, what's going on with Christian Yelich? That's the big thing in Milwaukee. So hopefully this, couple of days off, he can kind of reset and gather himself because they're going to need much more than that from him if they're going to want to contend with the rest of this division moving forward. On the mound, Brandon Woodruff has been nasty, a 1.59 ERA in 11 innings, but the rest have yet to really, insert themselves. Woodruff's the only guy gotten 2 starts since they were shut down once again because they were supposed to play the Cardinals here these past couple of days. Next up, we got the Cincinnati Reds, who are at 4-5. They've won 3 of 4, including a sweep of the Detroit Tigers. They swept both 7-inning games of the doubleheader. The bats are starting to come alive here in Cincinnati, like I talked to you guys about, specifically Castellanos. He homered a couple of times here. He's now got 4 on the year, 11 RBIs, hitting .387. He's just been mashing as a big offseason signing for them. Joey Votto's been steady at .259 with a couple of home runs. Nick Senzel missed some time, but he's hitting .286. Mike Moustakas missed some time, but he's hitting .313. The only guy is really Suarez out there at third base hitting .094, but the rest of the squad has certainly been fun to watch from an offensive perspective, at least the last couple of days here. And then a pitching side of things, man, this staff is just fun to watch like we thought they were. If you guys haven't checked them out yet, please do yourself a favor. Trevor Bauer's been locked in, 0.6 ERA in 13 innings. Sonny Gray, right there, 0.7 ERA in 12 innings. Castillo, a 4.5 ERA in 12 innings. But man, the strikeout numbers, both Bauer and Gray have 20 strikeouts through 2 starts. So it's just been fun to watch this Cincinnati rotation dice everybody up. But fourth place, the St. Louis Cardinals, they're at 2-3. Again, they've been off since Wednesday. They're supposed to have 4 with the Detroit Tigers coming up here, but who the heck knows? Paul Goldschmidt has been the bright spot early on, hitting .316 for them offensively, but once again, in the limited number of games, really not a ton to dive into with the Cardinals. And then we're talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates in the basement here. They're at 2-7. They certainly seem to be destined for the bottom of this division. They were just swept by Chicago like we talked about. Now they have 4 with Minnesota, who's at 7-2 at the top of their division. So they just placed the first place Cubs. Now they get the first place Twins, and things are not looking up for them. They are led by Moran offensively. He's hitting .273 with 5 home runs. He has had impressive power, but only 7 RBIs. So not a ton of guys getting on base, with everybody around him here hitting 167, 188, 143, 179, 143 for, as a team, hitting 178 here early on. It's not going to turn around in Pittsburgh, or at least I don't see it turning around anytime soon. So the Cubbies at the top have been very impressive. The Reds, 3 of 4, kind of turning things around, and then the Brewers and the Cardinals really yet to be discussed, obviously, since they've missed quite a few games with the outbreak that we talked about happening in St. Louis. But that'll wrap it up here for the Central Division. We talked about the American League, the National League as well. A lot of people in viable playoff position here coming down the stretch. But that'll wrap it up for this segment. We'll pause for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. And then when we come back, we'll wrap up today's episode talking about the West, talking about the NL West, the American League West, and man, is the National League dominating early on here. But I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll talk about that in just a second. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, this is episode number 225. I appreciate everybody tuning in today. Hopefully your work week's getting off to a rocking start here on Monday. If you're listening on your way home, we're finishing out, wrapping up this weekend's games. We talked about the East and Central divisions, and now we're finishing up, starting out with the American League West. A lot of 500 records here out west. The National League West certainly been more impressive thus far than the American League West, but the Oakland Athletics are in first place at 5-4. They took 2 out of 3 this weekend from the Seattle Mariners. They have 3 coming up with Texas here, who finds themselves at 3-5, but we'll get to them a bit later. Oakland struggling a bit offensively as a squad, hitting only 191. Simeon hitting 205, Chapman hitting 194, Olsen hitting 133, Grossman, he's really one of the only ones performing at 304. You also have Loreno hitting 290, but things offensively out there in Oakland certainly haven't been getting off to the start they had hoped. And the pitching staff kind of doing their thing to keep them around. Bassett in 2 starts, a .93 ERA. And then you got Luzardo, who's been in a couple of games here with a 1.35 ERA for Oakland. So they find themselves in first place here. Next up, you got the Houston Astros at 5-4. They're tied with the Oakland Athletics now at the top. The recently updated here Sunday standings as of Sunday night. They are up, again, 5-4. They did win today against the Angels. They got healthy against the likes of L.A. It's been up and down from an individual perspective for the Astros. I mean, you got Michael Brantley hitting .438 through 32 at-bats. Carlos Correa hitting .333. Gurriel hitting .294. But then you got Jose Altuve only hitting .158. George Springer only .182. Alex Bregman only .211. So when you have the depth of somebody like Houston, you can go with three of your top guys struggling here for the first 2 weeks when the other three are carrying them. But from a pitching side of things, it's been a different story in Houston. A lot of injuries to talk about. Ryan Presley, their elite setup guys dealing with elbow tenderness. Roberto Ozuna may be out now with some elbow tenderness. Verlander, we talked about, with elbow tendonitis, potentially missing longer times. So it's really been a struggle on the pitching staff for Houston. And the fact that they're kind of steadying the ship now at 5-4 has certainly been impressive through the first couple of weeks. In third place, we have the Seattle Mariners. They are at 4-6. Let's see here. They've lost 2 of 3 to Oakland over the weekend. Coming up here, they face off with, who did we just say they face off with? Let me pull it up. They got the LA Angels after a 4th game with Oakland. So one more against Oakland, then the Angels. Seattle individually has been led by the likes of Kyle Lewis out in right field, hitting .425 with 3 home runs. He leads the way with 9 RBIs. Evan White struggling, hitting .139. J.P. Crawford swinging the bat just a little bit, hitting .333. Not going to be for power, but he never saw an average that high during his time in Philadelphia, and there was concern whether or not he was able to hit at the big league level. So to see him at .333, taking 7 walks as well with an OBP of .455, that's definitely what Seattle signed up for, and a big reason why they've been overperforming in my eyes at 4-6 here. Next up, we got the Texas Rangers. They're at 3-5. They find themselves here, I guess, in 4th place based on winning percentage. Again, with Seattle playing 10 games, Texas only playing 8 games. It's a little tough to follow, but they've lost 5 of their last 7. So struggling a bit down there in Texas. Early on here, they got 3 coming up with the Oakland A's. Joey Gallo has certainly been a bright spot for them, hitting .310 with 3 home runs and 8 RBIs offensively. Shout out to Joey. I know during the offseason in quarantine, he put out a bunch of pictures and photos of, him hitting in his apartment in Texas and everything like that. But the rest of the offense has been non-existent. I mean, Andrews hitting .179, Frazier .192, Odor .125, Sin-Soo Choo hitting $150. Just nothing offensively outside of Joey Gallo in Texas, and thus their recent cold streak. But Lance Lynn has been fantastic through 2 starts on the bump. He's got a 0 ERA through 12 innings, only giving up 3 hits, 17 strikeouts. Mike Minor, however, has struggled. Jordan Lyles has struggled. Jesse Chavez has struggled. So really only Lynn and Gallo performing down there for the Texas Rangers, and everybody else struggling here just a little bit. So the LA Angels, they round out the American League West. They're at 3-7 in 5th place here. Let's see, they've lost 4 out of their last 5. They got 3 coming up with the Mariners, trying to stabilize things moving forward. Offensively, David Fletcher is performing for them, hitting .368. Justin Upton, not so much at .108. Albert Pujols only hitting $143, does have 2 home runs. Shohei Ohtani from the DH spot, hitting .148. Mike Trout missed some time due to the birth of his child. Shout out to Mike. Everything went well there. Everything is healthy. So he'll be back in action here coming up early this week. He's hitting .292 in 24 plate appearances early on. But Ohtani, Pujols, and Upton, 3 of the names we talked about during the preseason, and whether or not LA could actually make a run, all 3 of them not performing whatsoever, which is certainly why they find themselves 4 games under 500, only through 10 games in, because the pitching staff has been solid. I mean, Dylan Bundy, a 2.8 ERA through 12 innings. Canning, 3.3 ERA through 10 innings. Heaney, 2.7 ERA in 9 innings. It's been good from the bump. So those guys offensively are certainly the reason LA has struggled out of the gate here. But Oakland and Houston at 5-4 at the top of the division. Seattle at 4-6. Texas 3-5. And then the LA Angels rounding things out at 3-7. So, talking about the National League West now, there's a bit of a surprise happening out here in the National League West, and it starts out with your first place Colorado Rockies. Nobody had them at 6-2 here through the first 10 games, or at least I know I didn't, and they've won 6 out of their last 7, so coming on strong here. They got 4 with the San Francisco Giants coming up, so look to continue to take advantage of that. But looking at some individual performances in Colorado, David Dahl hitting .257, Charlie Blackmon, he continues to rake at .353, Nolan Arenado struggling a bit, so a lot of big names, Chris Bryant, Christian Yelich, Nolan Arenado hitting .226, he isn't struggling to the likes of Bryant and Yelich, but still well below his averages for his career, and he hasn't gone, he hasn't gone deep yet, no long balls and only 1 RBI. Ryan McMahon hitting .241, Trevor Story, he's raking along with Blackmon at .345, so the two of them along with Daniel Murphy hitting .364. So Colorado being carried by Blackmon, Story, and Murphy, while the likes of Arenado and Dahl try to figure things out offensively. And I'm surprised. It's just the word that comes to mind. And the pitching staff is why I'm surprised. I mean, Freeland, 1.5 ERA, Marquis, 1.5 ERA, Centinela, 2.4, Gray, 2.6, Bard, 3.1. Let's see, Estevez, 1.6, Almonte, 1.8. I mean, these guys are playing in Colorado, and they got these types of ERAs. It's just, this has never happened. So, shout out to Colorado, who is a winning percentage ahead of the second place LA Dodgers, who are at 7-3 early on. So, nothing to worry about out there in LA. They've won 5 out of their last 6. They got 3 coming up with the Padres. That'll be a nice test for them. But individually, for LA, I mean, Mookie Betts hitting .289 with 2 home runs early on. Justin Turner, .282. Corey Seager, .361. Hernandez is hitting .294. AJ Pollock hitting .370. The only guys struggling right now are Cody Bellinger. So MVP candidates, Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger, both hitting over 2 or under 200, and then Max Muncy hitting .220. So, LA getting good contributions, but again, the depth, just like we talked about with the Astros, really the reason why they've been able to be 7-3, even though they have some individuals struggling. On the mound, you got Ross Stripling with a 2.9 ERA, Urias 2.45, Dustin May 2.35, Clayton Kershaw just made his first start, 5.2 innings. He did not give up an earned run, and a statistic I saw out of the Clayton Kershaw outing, for all you Dodgers fans out there, was percentage of pitches thrown 92 miles an hour or faster. Going back to 2016, it was at 49%. 2017, 38%, and then 2018, 4%, 2019, less than 1%, and then in today's outing, it was at 25%. So, not at the likes of 2017 and 2016, but certainly better than the past couple of years, and a great starting point for Kershaw here early in 2020. But like I said, they got 3 coming up with the Padres. They are in third place at 6-4. Only a game back of the LA Dodgers there. They did lose 2 in a row here over the weekend. So they were at 6-2, but now limping into this Dodgers series here. Offensively, Fernando Tatis Jr. hitting .275 for them. Machado only hitting .231. His average is dipping a little bit there. Grisham hitting .263. Pham at .306. Will Myers at .257. So their offense is coming around. It did struggle this past weekend, but certainly been better than advertised here the first couple of weeks. From a pitching perspective, Chris Paddock has been excellent through 2 starts, a 1.64 ERA. He's been fun to watch. Lament through 2 starts has a 1.80 ERA, so the top end of that rotation really holding up. The bottom end hasn't been as good, which is why they find themselves at 6-4. In 4th place here, we have the 5-5 San Francisco Giants. They've outperformed my expectations early on. They took 2 out of 3 from the Texas Rangers and have 4 coming up with the 1st place Rockies. So it'll be interesting to see if Colorado continues to stay hot or if San Francisco can steal a couple of there in that 4-game series with Gabe Kapler managing out west. But Donovan Solano from the shortstop position hitting .484 early on. Man, and he is qualifying for the batting title. So he's at the top of the list at .484. Evan Longoria hitting .429, but he's only played in 4 games, so he won't reach that threshold. But man, that is impressive through a couple of weeks. On the mound here, Smiley's been good, 3.24 ERA. Gosman, not so much, 5.40. Samardzija struggling, a 9.31 ERA through 2 starts. So Jeff struggling out of the gates here in 2020. But the 5th place squad is the 3-7 Diamondbacks. And there were some pundits in the industry talking about how the Diamondbacks could be a potentially top 10 team. Well, now through a week and a half, they're in the basement at 3-7. They've lost 4 out of their last 5. They got 3 coming up with the Astros, so things won't get any easier for Houston. They're going to need Escobar to pick it up, who's hitting 132. You got Peralta hitting 182, Ahmed hitting 065, Calhoun hitting 167, Vargas hitting 158. So the offense in Arizona has not been able to catch up to the pitching. And then their staff has been up and down. I mean, Gallen and Kelly have ERAs right around 2.6, but then you got Bumgarner with a 4 ERA through 2 starts, Robbie Ray an 8.6 ERA, Luke Weaver 14.7. So, you know, Arizona is just kind of, the whole team, it really finds themselves in a rut here. But the Rockies, Dodgers, and Padres have been very impressive in the National League West through the first 10 days. But wrapping up today's episode here in the last couple of minutes, I want to talk about the playoff picture with the expansion and where we currently stand with 8 teams in each conference making it, the top 2 automatically qualifying, and then 2 wild card teams after that. So currently in the American League, you would have the Yankees and Orioles qualifying out of the East, the Twins and White Sox out of the Central, and then the A's and Astros out of the West. And the 2 next wild card teams would be both coming out of the Central at 5-5, the Cleveland Indians and Detroit Tigers. They would be in over the likes of the Rays, the Angels, the Mariners, the Royals, all of them. So the Tigers find themselves in the 8th and final playoff spot in the American League here currently through 10 days. So that is certainly a surprise, as well as the Orioles making the playoffs there instead of the likes of the Rays or the Red Sox. So a few surprises early on here in the American League. And then in the National League, you got the Braves and Marlins, we'll go with right now, coming out of the East, even though they're 2-1. I mean, if you want to say the Nationals, I don't know. They've only played 3 games. So the Cubbies and the Brewers coming out of the Central, and then the Rockies and the Dodgers out of the West, and then the 2 wild card teams would both be out of the West with the Padres and the Giants. So the Giants are the 8th and final playoff team, and a surprise here at 5-5 in over the Cincinnati Reds and the Washington Nationals, as well as the Phillies, who are currently a game under 500. So it is way too early to talk playoffs. Some teams have played 3 games, other teams have played 10 games, but I figured wrapping things up, we'd say, hey, the Giants would be in as the 8th spot, and the Tigers would be in as the 8th spot. So if you're wondering how baseball's going in 2020, just tell your friends that much. Say, hey, the Giants and the Tigers would make the playoffs if the season ended today. And there was arguments to be made that they could pick number 1 and number 2 in the 2021 MLB draft. But oh, man, that was a fun episode for everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed it out there listening. If you did, please share this with a friend. Shoot a text message out to one of your buddies who's a baseball guy. Say, hey, this podcast is a lot of fun to listen to. They give you daily content, keep you up to date on everything you need to know, we would certainly appreciate it here within the GSMC Podcast Network. As well as head to social media, check out our Facebook, Twitter pages. We'll keep you guys up to date. But as always, like, rate, review, subscribe, all of the above. I appreciate it. But I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. That'll do it for today's episode. I'll always love talking to you guys here on Monday, August 3rd. I'll be back once again Wednesday night recording for Thursday's episode, but make sure you click subscribe so you get all the information between now and then. So hopefully everybody out there enjoys the rest of the night. You have a rest of a great week, and I'll talk to you guys again on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.